You may be a little bit confused on today's video because we are actually taking our videos from the Curious IT channel and actually moving them all over to the IT Career Questions channel because I want to make sure that all the information that I'm providing to you guys can all be found in the same location. It really makes the most sense because we're really trying to make sure that I can provide you with the most information that really pertains to getting into IT and the skills and the knowledge that it takes to be successful. So in this video today, we are going to be installing VirtualBox, downloading Server 2019 ISO, and then we will actually be installing Server 2019 with VirtualBox. Now, you're gonna find more videos later on this week and into next week where we actually go into more details on promoting our Server 2019 to a domain controller, setting up Active Directory, and then of course talking about the actual structure for Active Directory as well, and of course adding users. So let's jump into today's video and start installing VirtualBox, downloading Server 2019, and then of course installing Server 2019. Let's get started and go to virtualbox.org, or you can just simply type into Google VirtualBox and it will show up right away. But virtualbox.org takes you right there. The first thing that you'll get to is, as you can see, download VirtualBox. So what we're going to do is pick our host. We're on a Windows machine, but you can utilize this if you're on the Mac OS or on a Linux desktop computer as well. So we're going to go ahead and click on Windows host because that's what we're running, is a Windows host. We're going to go ahead and save this to our desktop. That's fine. Just make a note of your save location so that way you can find that file and install it. Let's get to the installation. Then I can stop rambling. Sorry. So we're going to go ahead and double click this, or again, go back to your save location, and the process is simple. We're just going to go next, because all of these defaults are exactly what we want them to be. We don't need to change anything right now. You can see there's a lot of different options that we could select from on installing and not installing. Everything is going to be simple and basic, so just next. You can check these boxes if you want them, or if you don't want these shortcuts, but just go to next. Our network interface is going to shut down for a second. That's okay. Don't be alarmed. Just go ahead and go through the installation, and you shouldn't have any problems. That was our screen blinking because we have our Windows UAC prompt. So now that's it. We can start Oracle VirtualBox and we can go to our next video. We're going to be downloading Server 2019, but from this page you can also download Server 2016 and Server 2012. These are all evaluation copies. They're good for about 180 days, I believe. So that is something to keep in mind, but these are free evaluations that you guys can utilize so you can get familiar with servers. And we're going to be utilizing Server 2019 in our next video where we will install Server 2019 with VirtualBox. So let's go ahead and start the download process. The first thing and easiest to do is go ahead and go to Google, or in your address bar, type in Windows Server 2019 ISO. The first link that you should receive should say Windows Server Evaluations. You can also type in Windows Server 2019 Evaluations. This link should come up from Microsoft's Eval Center. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. Before we begin the process for the download for Windows Server 2019, I just want to point out that if you scroll down, you can find the other options for different server evaluations that they do offer. But going back up, we are going under Windows Server 2019, we're going to select ISO and hit continue. From here, you're going to want to fill out your information. I'm just going to go ahead and run through this with some bogus information just so you guys can see what it's like. Once we have our information filled out, we can then click on continue, and then we're going to get prompted with our language. So we're going to select English, you select whatever language you're comfortable with, and then click on download. From here, we will then get prompted with our download prompt here. Here is our server evaluation ISO. I am going to rename this just so that it's easier for us to find. Now you can download this wherever you'd like. Just make sure you make a note of that save location. We're going to call this Windows Server 2019 and click save. So now our download is happening right now. The next thing that we're going to be doing in our next video is actually installing Server 2019 with VirtualBox. That's it. That's all it takes to download an evaluation copy of Microsoft Windows Server. You should have already downloaded and installed VirtualBox and downloaded the Windows Server 2019 ISO. So when we load up VirtualBox, this is the initial screen that you get. You will not see these at first. These are already virtual machines that I already have installed. In today's video, we're going to do a new one. So what we're going to do once we have VirtualBox loaded, ready to go, is going to go ahead and click on New. From here, we are going to name our virtual machine, and I'm going to call this one Server 2019 WDS, because this is going to be our WDS server. This is something that we'll talk about in future episodes, but let's go ahead and go through our machine folder. It's at C users root virtual machine, VirtualBox VMs. That's not where I want it. I'm going to change this folder. We're going to go and scroll down to this one right here on one of our other drives. And you can see in our type here, we have multiple types of operating systems that can be loaded within VirtualBox. Here we have Linux, Solaris, BSD, IBM, Mac OS X, and other, of course. Microsoft Windows is what we want selected. We don't want Windows 7. We want other Windows, 64-bit, and then we're going to click on Next. The next part here, again, this is very important, and this is something that you're going to have to keep in mind when you look at the settings on your own computer. Just so we can cover this very briefly, if you right-click on your taskbar and you go to System, we're going to have some information about our PC show up, and right here we're going to look at our processor. We have an AMD Ryzen 7 2700X 8-core processor, and we have 32 gigs of RAM. Now, if you're running a Windows 10 machine that you're doing this from, this would be very easy for you to do. If you're on a Mac OS, it is a little bit different. I'll have to make a different video for that. I apologize, and same with Linux. We'll have to make different videos for those operating systems as well, so stay tuned for those. So for our computer that's hosting the virtual machines, it has an 8-core processor, and we have 32 gigs of RAM. So we have more than enough power, processing power, and more than enough RAM for our virtual machine. So for this virtual machine, we are going to set it to 2 gigs. Now, please keep in mind, this is really heavily dependent on how much RAM your computer has. If you have 8 gigs of RAM, you would be okay with doing 2 gigs of RAM for your virtual machine. If you have 4 gigs of RAM, pushing it to 2 gigs, it's a little sketchy. It's definitely a little sketchy. However, it should be okay. The more RAM you have, the better. But to run virtual machines, 2 gigs at a very bare minimum is ideal. So we're going to go ahead and click on Next. We're going to create a virtual hard disk now. There's no changes here. We're going to create a VDI, a VirtualBox disk image. We'll go over the other settings again in future videos. This is more or less setting it up initially for the first time. So VDI is perfectly fine for us. And we're going to do a dynamically allocated size for the physical hard disk. You can set a fixed size. So say we have a hard drive that has, a terabyte of space left on it, and we want to set 500 gigs to our virtual machine. We could do that by doing fixed size, but the dynamically allocated size, it says right here, dynamically allocated hard disk file will only use space on your physical hard disk as it fills up to a maximum fixed size, although it will not shrink again automatically when space on it is freed. So it just kind of, this is the best option when creating virtual machines that don't have a lot of use, right? When you're not going to be allocating a lot of resources to these virtual machines, you're not going to be installing a lot of programs, or maybe it's a file server. If it's a file server, you'd probably want to maybe do a fixed size. But for something that's just going to be kind of a service machine, the dynamically allocated size is just fine. So click on Next. From here, we have our file location. That's correct. We have our set size right here to 20 gigabytes for the hard drive. Again, it'll allocate space as needed. And we're going to go ahead and click on Create. Now what you see here is we have on our left-hand side our Server 2019 WDS. That's this right here. So we want to make sure we have that selected, and we're going to click on Start. Once we click on Start, we're going to have another window pop up. From this part, we're going to select our ISO that we downloaded. So from our previous video, we downloaded our Server 2019 ISO. We're going to go ahead and click on this folder right here. And then we have it automatically loaded to the correct location that our ISO was downloaded to. So you might have to browse to yours. This was easy for us. So we're going to go ahead and select Server 2019 ISO. Click Open, and then I'm going to click on Start. So what's going to happen now is VirtualBox is going to start the Windows operating system installation
portion. Probably didn't phrase that correctly or properly. I apologize, but you get the drift, right? As you can see here, we are now loading the virtual machine with the Windows installation. So this is very straightforward. If you've ever installed any type of Windows operating system before, it's very, very basic. It's very easy to do, even servers. So I think a lot of people might have a misconception that installing a server is very, very difficult to do, and it's really not. Or installing like a Windows Server operating system could be difficult to do. It's not. So what we're going to do here is just go ahead and click on Next. We're going to click on Install Now. Now, this next part is something that I always do. It's something I've always done just because, I don't know, maybe OCD, maybe it's just the way that I've always done it. We don't have a product key, so we're gonna click on I don't have a product key, obviously. We're gonna click on accept license, click on next. This is the part I was talking about. I always click on custom. I always like to make sure that the hard drive or hard drives in that case are showing up. They are the way that they're showing up the way that they should be. They have the correct allocated size assigned to them. And then once I can verify that, I will then click on next. And this starts the installation process. I'm gonna pause the video right here and we'll come back once this is finished, and then we'll talk about what happens once this is done. And this shouldn't take too long, maybe 10 minutes or so, depending on the speed of your computer. So hang tight, we'll be right back. So it finished that installation process, it rebooted, and now it's starting back up again to continue the installation. And we'll be back again. And one more reboot later. Now we've come to the part where we need to fill in some password information. So make sure you create a complex password and that you remember this complex password. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in my password, right, meow. Sir, did you just say meow? All right, once we go through that part, we put in our password, we go to next, we have a Windows logon screen. So now the fun really begins. So what I typically like to do is go down here to the bottom right of VirtualBox, right where it says Write Control, and I'll right click on that and we'll do Insert Control Alt Delete. So we go ahead and click on that. Now we can log in with that password that we just created. If I could type it in correctly. So now we are loading right into Windows Server 2019. That was it. That is all you have to do to install a virtual machine. That's all you have to do to install a Windows Server virtual machine, period. Like, that's it. It's simple, it's easy. We have it up and running now at this point. What more could we ask for, right? So that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next video where we talk about configuring this server. Thank you guys for watching. This is Curious IT. My name is Zach. As always, take it easy.